Hello, I'm Steve Harden, the CEO and founder of LifeWings Partners, and welcome to another edition of the LifeWings Leadership Lab. Today we're talking about how to deal with difficult people. This is one of the most crucial skills you can have as a leader, because those disruptive physicians and staff members on your team that are actively resisting what it is you're trying to accomplish will absolutely wreck the culture in your organization. They'll ruin your patient safety or quality initiative if you don't have good communication tools to deal with them as a leader. So today we're talking about how to deal with difficult people. So I'm going to offer 3 communication skills or tactics you can use to deal with those disruptive physicians and staff members that are on your team. Now, the 3 communication skills we're going to talk about actually come from the FBI, from the former Chief Hostage Negotiator for the FBI. Now, you may think it's a little bit odd to use communication tactics learned from the FBI, but think about it. Those disruptive team members, those difficult people that are in your organization are really holding your organization hostage to what it is you want to accomplish. And if you don't have effective tools or tactics to deal with them, you're not going to be able to move the organization from point A to point B and be an effective leader. And the other reason we want to learn from the FBI is the tools that they use in a hostage negotiation, they just have to work. I mean, failure is not an option. If you think about it, if they don't use proven tools that are really going to work, then in the end, someone's going to die in a hostage situation like that. So for the FBI, the tools they use have to really work. They can't be based on psychology or on theory. I mean, they've actually got to work and produce a good outcome. So everything that the FBI hostage negotiation team uses is based on the Nobel Prize-winning concept of behavioral economics. How do human beings actually work? How do they respond? What are their cognitive biases? And their tactics are also based on neuroscience. So what's actually happening in the mind of a human being? And how do we know what's actually happening because of the study of brain activity and the study of neuroscience. Now, one of the very first tools that the FBI uses when dealing with difficult people in a hostage situation is called mirroring. Now, of all the things that FBI hostage negotiators use, they'll tell you that mirroring is like a Jedi mind trick. Well, because it's really simple and it's really effective. So mirroring is where when you're dealing with a difficult person, you listen very intently to what they're saying, and in the last statement they make, you repeat back to them the 3 most important words in that statement. One may be complaining about a new change initiative, a new project to implement some sort of new evidence-based protocol, and so they're going off about it. Another change, another cookbook medicine, why do we have to make this change? You can't prove this change works, etc. There's just too much change going on around here. So in mirroring, you would repeat the 3 most important words of the last statement, and you might say something like, too much change, right? It shows that you're listening and that you have empathy. And the reason mirroring works is because it's based on neuroscience. We are drawn to things that are like us and are similar to us, and we fear and resist things that are different. So when you mirror, you're actually taking advantage of a neurobehavior by making yourself like the person that you're talking to, and that helps de-escalate the emotion in the conversation, right? And it opens up a more rational and more logical line of thought. So lots of research proves the validity and the value and effectiveness of mirroring. All right, so mirroring is just repeating back the 3 most important words of the last statement. So mirroring, the thing to remember there is repeat the three most important words in the statement. Okay, so the next tactic that the FBI would use is called labeling. Labeling is a really cool communication tactic and very effective, again, because it's based on neuroscience. So labeling actually asks you to call out or give a name to the emotion behind the communications that you're receiving from a disruptive or a difficult person. So going back to our last example about, hey, there's too much change going on here. Why do we have to adopt this protocol? You know, you can't prove that that works. You know, you're always changing how we provide care. Right? So what labeling asks you to do is actually call out the emotion in that statement. So you would say something like, it seems like change causes a lot of frustration for you, right? And again, this is based on neuroscience, because what neuroscientists have discovered is when you actually call out the emotion behind a difficult communication, the brainwave activity moves from that part of the brain that is focusing on an emotional response to that part of your mind that deals with logic and rational thinking. So again, labeling is a way to diffuse the emotion when having a conversation with a difficult person and move the conversation to a more logical or more rational plane. Right? The third tactic that the FBI uses in their difficult hostage negotiations is open-ended questions. This is really a single question, an open-ended question, and that question always starts with how. So when a difficult person is making an irrational or an illogical demand of you, instead of making a statement or asking a question that can be answered with yes or no, you ask an open-ended question that begins with how. And the one that the FBI uses the most and is found to be the most effective is, how am I supposed to do that, or how are we supposed to do that? So again, when you ask a question like this, instead of confronting and raising the emotional level by making a statement or asking questions that can be answered in yes, no, you're actually making the difficult person begin to negotiate with themselves and figure out how you are going to comply with their irrational or illogical request, right? So in labeling, we actually call out, right? So we confront the negative, and in open-ended questions always start with how, okay? Now, no matter which of these tactics that you're using, silence is an important part of them. So whether you're mirroring or labeling or asking the open-ended how question, after you do that, you have to stop talking. And the FBI would tell you that you have to be silent for at least 4 seconds. And I found for myself, I just actually count 1001, 1002. I just try to calm the difficult voices in my head that make me anxious about this particular conversation. And I found that the disruptive or difficult person will rush in to fill the silence. Right? So you can't use these techniques if you don't also use at least 4 seconds of silence after you use the technique. All right? So go over an example here and kind of show you how these all fit together. So in our example, we're in a surgical suite, we're in the OR, the surgical procedure is almost complete. The staff, the team is doing the counts, and in the midst of the count they realize that it's inaccurate, you know, they don't have a good count. So the circulator has just told the surgeon this, and this has caused an angry outburst from what is known as sort of a disruptive personality on the staff. So an angry outburst from the surgeon, and he or she says something like, "Ah, man, this happens all the time. Why can't you guys get this right? We're just going to go ahead, and I'm just going to go ahead and close, and you guys can do the count afterwards, because I'm sure we didn't leave anything in the body." right? So in our example, we assume that the circulator's already made a stop the line statement, and during the angry outburst, the surgeon has ignored the stop the line statement and pressed on. So using these communication techniques, the first thing the circulator might do labeling, right? So label the emotion behind the surgeon's outburst. So she might say something like, it seems like having to do the count again is causing you a lot of frustration and anger, right? And then, of course, the circulator is going to be silent and let the surgeon rush in and fill in that silence. So the surgeon responds, and he or she might say something like, well, of course I'm angry. You know, this happens to me all the time. You guys can never get the counts right. I'm always waiting on you. I am so sick of this happening all the time. So here, the circulator would pivot to mirroring, right? So she's already labeled the emotion behind the communication, so she'd pivot to the technique of mirroring, and she might say something like, all the time? And then, of course, be silent and let the surgeon rush in to fill the silence, right? So then the surgeon might say something like, well, no, you know, not all the time, but way too much. And listen, I'm just tired of waiting. I'm going to close, and you guys do the count after we close the wound. Now, in this case, both the circulator and the surgeon know that the policy is you have to get an accurate count before you close. So it doesn't, in the FBI's point of view, it doesn't do any good to escalate the situation by saying, hey, you're in violation of the policy. So what we'd do here is ask an open-ended question and make the surgeon start negotiating with himself. So the open-ended question from the circulator would sound like, hey, how are we supposed to do that, right? So avoid the inclination to make a statement of fact or a yes-no question, which might come out as, hey, so you want us to violate the policy, right? So that can be answered yes, no. The correct technique is to ask the open-ended question, hey, how are we supposed to do that? And experience will show that the difficult person will begin to negotiate with themselves, right? So the surgeon may respond to that with something like, well, listen, I know what the policy is, but you know, we're going to go ahead and close. I'm going to go ahead and close, and you guys do the count after I close, right? And so here the circulator would pivot back to mirroring and say something like, close despite the policy. And again, silence, right? At least 4 seconds of it. Let the surgeon fill in the silence, and he or she might say something like, okay, look, I know what the policy is, and yes, we really do need to have a good count before we close, right? So by using these communication tools and sort of pivoting from one to the other as you need, as the circumstance calls for it, you're able to engineer the outcome you want. And if you're like me and you're conflict adverse, these tools will be really valuable to you because they give you something to hang on to during the emotion of the moment, and allows you to think through this so you can get the conversation to a more rational and logical plane, right? So regardless of how you feel about conflict and how you feel about dealing with difficult people, you really have to nail it. I mean, you have to be able to use tools like this, because if you don't, the disruptive team member is going to hijack what you're trying to accomplish as a leader in the organization. So I really encourage you to work on tools like this. I think they'll be really, really helpful to you. All right, so the action step here is to just start practicing one of these 3 tools. I recommend you start trying to practice mirroring. It's the easiest to do. You can do it in normal conversation, and right away you're going to see how much empathy it develops with the person you're having a conversation with, and it'll help you get used to doing it, especially when the stakes are a little bit higher and there's a lot of emotion in the conversation. If you want to go deeper, I highly recommend that you buy Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. The link is in this post. If you're like me, it's one of those books you're going to read several times. You're going to highlight it, underline it, dog-ear it, because it's just chock full of really good, proven communication skills for difficult situations that really, really work. So highly recommend you get that book. Listen, if you like this video, subscribe to the channel, like it, share it with other people that have difficult people to deal with. I think they'll find a lot of value in these proven communication techniques. Hey, go out there and become the leader that you'd like to follow. And as always, we wish you every success on your leadership journey.